Once a basketball sensation, Jeremy Lin's remarkable journey captivated fans worldwide. However, as the years passed, the hope of seeing him return to the NBA seems to fade away. Despite his undeniable talent and immense popularity, Lin's path has been fraught with challenges, leading many to wonder why he may never grace the NBA courts again. Let's get into the factors that have contributed to this perplexing situation and try to decipher what lies ahead for this remarkable athlete. Number 1. Late bloomer. In the NBA, a lot of players hit the ground running and show their star potential from the get-go. They secure starting roles in their early careers and get all the attention, but there are some like Jeremy Lin who took a bit longer to bloom. He wasn't drafted and didn't really shine until he was 24, which made people question if his initial success was just a fluke. Now he's over 30 and it's tough for him to match the level of hype he had during the Linsanity days. People are skeptical if he can ever recapture that former glory after so many seasons have passed. You see, age catches up, and declining athleticism adds to the challenge for late bloomers like Lin to gain respect and recognition in the NBA. But hey, let's not forget the heart and determination he's shown throughout his journey. It's a tough road, but it isn't over for the late bloomers. Number 2. The rise of Linsanity. You know, basketball is always changing, and that means the way teams play has to change too. Remember Jeremy Lin's Linsanity days? Man, he was a beast with those pick and roll moves and driving skills. But things have shifted in the NBA. Now there's this huge focus on three-point shooting and spacing on the court. So Lin's playing style might not mesh perfectly with some of the modern offenses out there. Teams want players who can fit right into their game plans and bring something special to the table. Number 3. Injuries and performance decline. You know what? One of the main reasons why we might not see Jeremy Lin back in the NBA is his history of injuries. The guy has gone through a lot over the years. He's had knee problems and even a ruptured patellar tendon that needed surgery and tons of time for rehab. It's no joke, these injuries have really taken a toll on his body. And you know how NBA teams are. They get cautious when it comes to players with injury histories. They want someone who can stay on the court for the long haul, and understandably so. So with all these concerns about his health and ability to stay fit, it's kinda tough for him to get back into the league. It's a bummer, but that's the harsh reality he's facing. Number 4. Lower draft spot. Jeremy Lin's got this amazing scoring talent, especially during the Linsanity days when he was dropping huge numbers and making those clutch game-winning shots. But here's the thing. Some fans aren't entirely convinced. They feel like he might not bring as much to the table in the other areas of the game. They say his defense and playmaking skills are just average at best. Whenever he's on a stacked team and has to play a smaller role, he doesn't really stand out. And you know, in the NBA, they really value players who can do it all, versatile and well-rounded. Some believe Lin's a bit too one-dimensional, not quite possessing the complete skill set of those elite players. Number 5. Asian American background. Being one of the most prominent Asian American players in NBA history, Jeremy Lin had to face some serious racial bias. When he first burst onto the scene, there were people who just couldn't believe his success and labeled it as a fluke, which was totally unfair and undeserved. And to make matters worse, some media personalities didn't shy away from making racially charged comments, emasculating him based on his ethnicity. It's sad to see that even a sport predominantly played by black athletes breaking stereotypes as an Asian American came with its own set of prejudices. Some coaches, execs, and players might have had implicit biases, impacting how they perceived Lin's abilities and his career path. Number 6. Unimpressive playoff showings. The NBA regular season is cool and all, but when it comes to making legends, it's all about the playoffs. That's where the true greats shine, but when we look at Jeremy Lin's playoff record, it's been a bit underwhelming. In 23 playoff games, he's only managed to average 8.4 points, shooting at 39.7% rate. That's not exactly the kind of impact you'd expect from a player of his caliber when the stakes are at their highest. And because of that, people can't help but wonder if his regular season success can really translate when it matters the most. Until he puts together some outstanding playoff performances, the critics won't let up, and they'll keep pointing to his struggles in the postseason as a knock against him. Number 7. Unconventional growth journey. But what's fascinating about Jeremy Lin? His development path has been anything but conventional, especially when you compare it to most NBA stars. Back in college at Harvard, he had a minimal role. And to make things even more intriguing, he went undrafted. But then in his second season, the guy exploded onto the scene. Not as a rookie, handed the keys as a high draft pick, but coming off the bench and making a name for himself. Plus, he even spent some time in the D-League early on, which is uncommon for dominant franchise players. Now, the traditionalists might not be too keen on their unorthodox trajectory, as they prefer players with a more defined growth into stardom, playing major roles immediately. Before we continue, we would like to ask you, our valued viewers, to consider subscribing to our channel. Number 8. Character and popularity. Back in 2012, Jeremy Lin's fame skyrocketed out of nowhere, and suddenly he was all over the tabloids. There was so much drama about his contract negotiations as a free agent, and rumors were flying about tensions with players like Carmelo Anthony. Being the first American of Chinese or Taiwanese descent in the NBA, Lin attracted massive global attention. Some folks felt like all that glitz and glamour during the Linsanity era was more about show than substance. And you know how it is when you're in the spotlight like that. Your outgoing personality and celebrity status might not sit well with everyone, and that could have caused some friction with his teammates too. It's tough being in the limelight. Number 9. Rivalry to take over from former stars. There was this intense race to find the next big star in the NBA after some of the legendary players like Jordan and Kobe retired. And along with Jeremy Lin capturing everyone's attention with his incredible skills and inspiring story, the league, hungry for a new icon, hyped him up as their heir apparent to those basketball greats. But let's be real, those were some unfair expectations to place on him. They expected Lin to single-handedly bring back the glory days and boost ratings, which was a lot of pressure for any player, let alone someone relatively young and new to the scene. As expected, he couldn't entirely fill the shoes of these basketball legends, and that led to some harsh criticism and overreaction. It's like they built him up just to tear him down when he couldn't meet those sky-high expectations. Number 10. Absence of robust, skilled mentoring. You know, one thing that really held Jeremy Lin back was the lack of strong veteran mentorship. It's like for many young players who still need to fine-tune their skills, having an elite veteran teammate can make all the difference. But unfortunately, Lin never had that advantage. He didn't get to play with an established all-star in their prime who could have really groomed him and shown him the ropes. And you know what they say, the wisdom you gain from being around championship icons is just priceless. Without that mentorship, Lin ended up developing some bad habits that made it tough for him to find his place in the pro scene. If only he had a stronger voice guiding him early on, he could have had the tools to become a real impact player. Number 11. Perceived as cocky and arrogant. You know, Jeremy Lin's meteoric rise to fame was quite a whirlwind for a humble guy from Harvard. But you know how it is when someone goes from being an undrafted underdog to a basketball sensation overnight. It can be a bit overwhelming. Jeremy might have felt the need to prove himself even more, and in so doing, he said a few things that didn't sit well with some folks. Take for instance his claim in GQ that he had outplayed the already established star Chris Paul in a head-to-head matchup. Now some saw that as an inflated sense of confidence and ego, especially since he was still unproven at that point. This perceived cockiness probably didn't sit well with some of his peers and coaches. Number 12. Limited national team success. It's interesting how NBA players gain respect by playing for Team USA in international tournaments like the Olympics and the FIBA World Cup. However, Jeremy Lin hasn't had much of a chance to do that throughout his career. He was added to the 2010 World Championships team quite late, and only participated in a few training camps because he couldn't secure a consistent spot on the national team. He missed out on the opportunity to showcase his skills on the global stage. Number 13. Limited playoff involvement. Making it to the playoffs is super important in the NBA if you want to gain respect. Jeremy Lin, though, didn't get much playtime during the playoffs until his third season with Houston. During the wild insanity days with the Knicks, he only got a measly 7 minutes of action in the postseason, and unfortunately the team lost in the first round both times. It's a bummer because not being in the playoffs regularly meant he missed out on the chances to prove himself against the best players when the pressure was at its peak. If he had more playoff exposure early on, it could have really helped boost how people perceived him in the long run. Number 14. Trouble adjusting to reserve role. When Jeremy Lin was at his peak, he really shined as a starter and could handle those major minutes like a pro. It was quite impressive. However, later in his career, he seemed to have some difficulties adjusting to a backup role. You see, coming off the bench requires a different mindset and being comfortable with limited playing time and short bursts. Unfortunately, this impacted his efficiency and production because he had to dial back his usage and shots. Number 15. Viewed as a defensive flaw. Jeremy also faced criticism when it came to his defense. People pointed out that he lacked the strength, length, and lateral quickness needed to keep up with the league's fastest and craftiest scorers. Especially when defending elite point guards one-on-one, he struggled, and that raised concerns about his performance in crunch time situations. All these factors made it tough for him to adapt well to a supporting role off the bench, which affected his overall impact in the game. Despite his undeniable talent and contributions to the game, Jeremy Lin's NBA journey seems to have come to an end. Whether it's his struggles to adapt to a supporting role or the perceived defensive limitations, his path forward in the NBA remains uncertain. Nonetheless, his impact on the sport will always be remembered.